Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for my session all about instructional design. My name is Sharon Chaden Glass. I am currently an instructional media designer for Sinclair Community College in Dayton, Ohio. Before that, I taught in intensive English programs and higher education for 13 years, so mostly teaching international students who are studying in the United States. Um, like everyone else, I originally prepared to present this presentation in person and to a group of people who may only be mildly curious about e-learning. Um, but now e-learning is all the rage, isn't it? So this pandemic has refocused everyone's attentions on new priorities. We are in real time seeing dramatic changes unfold in how we continue to teach and learn at a time that requires us to fundamentally do things differently. This is terrifying and it's uncomfortable, but it is also exciting. So I start my presentation on this positive note because I think that we all need that in our lives right now, positivity, and also possibilities for learning in the future because it is here. Actually, it has been here, but before we're able to, as teachers, choose to disengage from change and keep doing what we're doing, but we can't look away anymore. The future is here. So it's clearly no longer an option. Not only are we being compelled to teach differently, but some of us have outright lost our jobs. And more of us are uncertain if we can continue to teach in the situations that for a whole host of reasons have become incompatible with our lives. So I offer this presentation to you who are seeking an alternative to teaching that still satisfies your desire to educate learners. So, like many of you, I've had a somewhat circuitous career path since I finished my master's degree in 2006. In this day and age, it's increasingly difficult to choose one career path and stick with that for your whole life. Even if your plan is to teach, maybe you think, oh, I'll change, places that I teach, but I'll always be a teacher. Well, especially now, teaching is going to continue to evolve and change, not only in terms of our responsibilities and duties, but also in terms of the skills that we need to successfully carry out our work. Most of us know and have taken heart the advice that we need to continue to learn and be adaptable, but I would also go a step further and advise that you continue to seek out new ways to continue to grow in your use and familiarity with all types of learning technologies. It's great for your career, but it's even better for your students. We need to now more than ever prepare our students for living and working in an information-based economy and society. All right, so you might be ready for a career in instructional design. If any of these apply to you, maybe you're emotionally drained from years of teaching, but you don't want to completely leave the field of education. I totally feel you on that. Teaching is a very draining profession for so many reasons. Maybe you enjoy learning and experimenting with technology. Maybe you love collaborating and working on a team, but you can also get the job done by yourself when necessary. Maybe you want a career with more possibilities to work remotely. Ha ha ha, a lot of us are actually doing this right now, and it's going to be interesting to see as people try to do more face-to-face types of jobs, just how often we'll continue to work remotely. You enjoy new and different projects. Maybe you have great time management skills. Maybe you want a more flexible job, and instructional design typically is a more flexible job than teaching in person. So this is an overview of where I'm going today. I am going to talk about what instructional design is, what instructional designers do, what their job prospects are, what skills and competencies overlap between TESOL and instructional design, and what you can do to prepare for a career in instructional design. So first, what is ID and what do IDs do? So instructional design is all about the planning and setting up the learning experience. So put plainly, it's the practice of designing learner-centered, often digital, not always, but usually, especially now. So designing these instructional materials and or learning experiences. It can supplement face-to-face instruction. Now that we're in the age of COVID, it can mean thinking strategically about how to plan remote learning in a way that makes sense to students. Maybe it's creating digital components for hybrid instruction as we move into the fall and more schools are trying 50-50 blends of instruction. This could be increasingly important. It can also be developing fully online courses. So the key difference between a teacher and an instructional designer is that an instructional designer isn't typically involved in delivering the instruction to the learners. The job responsibilities for an ID are going to look differently depending on the type of organization that you're working for. So in the corporate world, you're going to be creating learning experiences that address a performance gap that needs to be closed in order to protect the company's bottom line. In higher education, you're going to be creating learner-centered educational experiences that help students better make sense of course content. An instructional designer typically works with a subject matter expert, also called a SME, in order to create a coherent learning experience for students. So they look at learning outcomes, activities, assessments, the layout of digital materials, web accessibility. They are the behind the scenes person who makes sure that the way that the course is experienced by students is organized and makes sense and hits on those learning outcomes. The ID is also the advocate for the learner. They will provide feedback to the instructor to help them think about how students are going to experience the class. And in that situation, I was referring to it within higher education. Well, it's also important to note that the term instructional designer does look incredibly different depending on the organization that you're applying to. And that's why it's really important that you read through the job description and expected duties so you can have a better idea of what you'll actually be doing during the day, whether you'll work independently or on a team. So these are some examples of job duties that might fall to an instructional designer. So as you can see, there's a lot of room for branching out and learning new technologies. And that's really critical in this field because things change so very rapidly. If you're one of those teachers who is out there trying new things all the time, this really might be a great job for you. So just some of the things that I listed here: VR and AR, that's virtual reality and augmented reality. OER refers to open educational resources. LMS administration is referring to learning management system administration. So that's examples of that are Canvas, Blackboard, Desire to Learn, or Brightspace. These are kind of like the big box LMSs. You might also serve as the advocate and the person who explains to instructors how to make their courses accessible online to people who have disabilities. That's a huge part of e-learning. So what are the job prospects for people who are entering the field of instructional design? I think that the projected job growth is very good in this coming decade. The median pay is very decent. In fact, it might be a whole lot more than people are making depending on which field in education you're coming from. And I'm focusing just on the United States because that's my key audience. So depending on where you're coming from, this might be similar in pay. It might be a lot more. These are some screenshots that I took from Indeed and Glassdoor just to kind of show you that they're showing the same kind of information that I found on the U.S. Department of Labor site. So these are some job titles that you might find that lie within the field of instructional design. As I said before, read the job description carefully so you have an idea of the actual work that you're going to be doing. You might be, as an instructional designer, only responsible for a certain part of a project, or you could be an end-to-end developer of a certain project. So it really depends on how the organization has set up their team that creates these materials. These are some examples of job requirements that you might see. I just pulled these from different job postings so you can kind of see that some of the things overlap, and I'll talk about this in a couple slides from now. But a lot of these things are things that you already do as a teacher. Some of them are new, maybe creating interactive tutorials. But this gives you an idea of what these jobs can look like. So who hires instructional designers? So many different people. You have corporations, all different kinds of corporations, because they're always looking to find a way to deliver trainings and education to employees so that they don't have to send employees back to school. So if they can make those trainings in-house and continue to educate their employees so they don't have to lose them to gaps to time spent going back to school, that's really valuable to them. Government agencies hire instructional designers, and so do colleges and universities, and I wouldn't be surprised if more positions in K-12 instructional design become available. So I was hired as a part-time consultant to simply coach faculty in moving their classes into the online space. So, and that opportunity came about just by somebody knowing that I was involved in this field. So if you get involved in this field and let people know that you are available, you'd be kind of surprised to find how many people reach out to you because it's such a hot topic, a hot job right now. So if you already have experience in using an LMS, make sure you put that on your resume, that you have been a user of Canvas or Blackboard or whatever the LMS is, because that really does carry a lot of weight, especially if you've created some really nice digital content within that space that you can show someone that you already have some of these skills for instructional design. In my job supporting faculty members during this pandemic, I've really been surprised at how many faculty members have simply been avoiding dealing with our university's LMS, and now they're completely flummoxed by the online learning experience. So if you have comfort and familiarity with using LMSs, that is a huge selling point for you. So IDs have job security because online learning is growing in K-12, higher education, and corporate education. Workplaces are always going to have a need to provide training and education to their employees. And there's an increasing need to incorporate principles of universal design and accessibility into educational experiences. So what are some skills and competencies that overlap between TESOL and ID, just to kind of give you some confidence like you totally could do this? So here are some common competencies that I see between the two fields. Writing course goals, objectives, and learning outcomes, creating assessments. If you have created assessments for your class, and who hasn't, talk about that. That is a great skill that is going to become useful within this field. If you have experience and understanding of learner-centered teaching, adult learning theories, especially if you're going for corporate education, being familiar with different kinds of learning technologies and how to navigate LMSs, collaborating, problem solving, and your intercultural competence. Those are all key competencies that I really see within both fields that can really help you think about how you could be within this field. So if the term instructional design is new to you, I think that you're going to find it so surprising how many core competencies are really shared between these two fields. So perhaps one of the reasons that TESOL or second language acquisition and instructional design have so much overlap is because their foundational theories complement and sometimes mirror each other. So as I started reading about backward design theory, I thought, wow, I've already been doing that. So backward design theory within instructional design recommends that the instructional designers start with the learning outcomes of what a student needs to be able to do at the end of the course. Then they design the assessments for those outcomes, and finally the activities, readings, and videos are either located or created to prepare students for those assessments. That sounds a lot like what I did for 13 years before when I was teaching ESL in higher education. And I think that if you look into these different instructional design theories, you will see so much mirrored within this field that it's a really nice complement. If you've already been educated within TESOL, it's a very natural progression to move into this field. So I want to take a minute to talk about the terms instructional design versus learning design. So these are two terms that grew out of two different branches in adult learning theory, and you'll see that manifest in how job descriptions are written for the instructional designer. So some job descriptions will say that the instructional designer will locate performance gaps and then design training materials to eliminate the gaps. So this approach sounds very behaviorist, right? And that's because the job description emerges from the ID field, which takes on a more Skinnerian perspective, which you see in this quote. Well, on the other hand, a learning designer is more likely to include in the job description factors like understanding adult learning theory and creating learner-centered materials, which is because that field emerges from a constructivist background, which, as you know from reading Piaget and Vygotsky, those are big names in understanding second language acquisition as well. There are some differences between these two fields, and I think that these key differences stem from where the instructional designer and the teacher are located in the learning process. So the teacher is on the front line. They're interacting directly with the student. So they're concerned about things like the individual learning factors, social interaction, the role that culture plays in learning. And they are focusing a lot on creating communicative materials and instruction that contextualizes language learning. On the other hand, the instructional designer is behind the scenes and they're thinking critically about how to best use digital spaces that are available to learners to help them to continue to learn in the teacher's absence. So if this all sounds interesting to you, you're thinking, what can I do to prepare for a career in this field? So my first recommendation is to take stock of your current relevant previous job experiences and competencies. And that could include any of these things. If there's something on this list that you don't have, try to explore that. See if you can do some basic web design and development that really helps you understand user experience and web accessibility if you can just practice designing your own website. Another thing you need to do is explore your educational options. There are traditional educational paths such as getting a bachelor's or a master's or a graduate certificate. What I chose to do was to get a graduate certificate while I was also teaching full-time, so I was able to get a tuition waiver, so it didn't cost me any money, but I found the traditional educational path really helpful to me because it made me accountable to get it done and to actually put in the work to understanding and using the skills that I needed for this field. But if that is not for you, there are also free options for learning about instructional design. If you want to just kind of put your toe in the water and see if it's something you want to pursue, you can go to edX.org or Coursera and take some of those free online courses. They're usually MOOCs, massive open online enrollment. And you can just kind of see if it sounds like something you're interested in. LinkedIn Learning also has some great free resources for learning about instructional design as well. The next thing I would recommend is creating a digital portfolio. This is something that I started to do when I was looking at applying to jobs within instructional design. I actually did a recorded screen capture of my course within my learning management system to show how I could set up a digital learning experience for students, complete with outcomes, due dates, the activities, the videos, the assessments, so that another person can see that I can develop an online learning experience for students. You can do this within your LMS if you're already at a university or an institution with an LMS, but you can also do it by using a free trial of e-learning software. So I would recommend using Articulate 360 to author a course. Then you can export it as a SCORM file and then load that into an LMS like Thinkific or Moodle, which are both free LMSs. You can embed the link to the course within your resume, or if you've simply just created a video of you showing a demonstration of what you've done, you can include that link within your video. I had a whole section just called Video Portfolio on my resume so that people could quickly go there and see what I was capable of producing. You can create short instructional videos and upload them to YouTube. But make sure you use a YouTube account that you want designated for this specific purpose. Just to demonstrate that you can create engaging, interactive content through video, make sure you caption your video. YouTube will automatically do captions, but do go in and make sure that they are accurate. And then also add tags to your video's metadata to improve discoverability. I also encourage you to become familiar with software that's commonly used within the field of instructional design. These are some software packages, particularly Adobe and Articulate are very popular e-learning software authoring programs that are useful to become familiar with. Articulate will offer you, I think it's an 8-week trial to try it out and get to know its software. Camtasia and Snagit are made by TechSmith, and both of them are helpful in creating videos. I'd also become familiar with tablets, screen recorders, video conferencing software, and if you're able to, AR and VR as well. Another thing you can do is increase your understanding of accessibility. So universal design refers to designing so that all learners can learn. User experience is designing from the perspective of how the user encounters the content and the course. Accessibility really means removing barriers. It doesn't mean that everyone is necessarily going to learn at the same speed. It means taking away any barriers that are getting in the way of a person being able to learn. And so for web accessibility, this might mean adding alt text to images so that a person who is blind and is using a screen reader can be able to understand what the image is. It means understanding how screen readers translate visual pages into words for the visually impaired, and even providing captions to videos. These are some of my recommended resources for learning more about instructional design. My top recommendation is at the very top of this list. There was an instructional designer named Nyla Spooner who has created a fantastic podcast, and it's totally for this audience, people who are new to the field of e-learning, and she is so very knowledgeable and she takes questions, and it's a great resource for you to check out. I've also included a professional organization, ISTE, The third resource is a webinar about the differences between teaching face-to-face and teaching online. And then I also have a couple PDFs there for you to review that will be helpful to you. And I hope that you'll also consider TESOL's Career Path Development Professional Learning Network. That learning network, you can join it and be connected with other TESOL members who are figuring out their career paths. And also, Liz England has created a really great book for you to consider if you're thinking about how to transition out of a teaching role into something else. Finally, do feel free to send me an email. Also, you can check out my YouTube channel called Lucky Frog English. I put both instructional videos for students and professional development resources for other teachers as well. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And here are my references. And I thank you so very much for joining me today, and I hope you have a great rest of your virtual TESOL 2020 conference.